So now we're going to shift gears to the second chapter of our discussion and look forward a little further as it relates to B to B to C. And as I said, we're going to be joined shortly by a set of panelists, and we're going to have a little discussion about how different companies are dealing with this. But before we get started, it might be interesting to break down B to B to C just so we're clear on what we're talking about. So what do we mean by B to B? So B2B is really the traditional sharing of information, master data, weights, measures, size, dimensions, master data exchange between business partners, brand owners and retailers, for example, oftentimes with the help of the Global Data Synchronization Network through EDI, what we've been working on for, frankly, 25, 30 years. B2C looks a little different. Here you have the B as the business, obviously. The C is the consumer now. And all of a sudden you have some somewhat not so new intermediaries that are in that space. Twitter, Facebook, we've got search engines like Yahoo and Google and Bing. You've got major platform providers like eBay that you're going to hear from this afternoon, Amazon, and others. And now all those intermediaries are looking to share information with the consumer as well, creating their own content and getting in between that dialogue with the consumer that used to be very controlled through network television, through your package. Now the consumer has a high appetite for information, and she can get it from lots of different sources out there. So the way we've looked at this is in an existing universe and an emerged universe. I won't say emerging because it's already emerged. And in the existing universe, this is a space that should be pretty familiar to us. The pain points are around the labor cost of managing bad data and disruptions in the supply chain, and the benefits are around automation and interoperability. The emerging universe offers some different benefits, though. The pain points here are a little different in that, yes, we have bad data, but now we're trying to manage all that data across multiple channels, omni-channel. We have so many more touch points and stakeholders who see and use and leverage that data in our business than we had ever before. And the consumer really is in charge, right? Consumers' adoption of technology oftentimes well surpasses industry's adoption of technology. And so now consumers' adoption of that technology really guides how we need to catch up in many cases. And the benefits are more around consumer trust, brand loyalty, and really revenue growth. And so data quality really means different things in different groups. In the case of the existing universe, data quality is something that's still reasonably private, business to business, oftentimes a little transparency driven through a OneSync data accuracy scorecard, perhaps. But the improvements in that data quality are reasonably gradual between trading partners. But data quality in that B2C space is very public, very transparent. And the time that the consumer allows for us to fix that data quality is immediate, no time at all. They're absolutely unforgiving for quality of data that isn't accurate, isn't up to standard. And so now what we're trying to think about is how do we leverage GS1 standards across that entire continuum, across this continuum? Because this is the world we live in today, right? B2B, B2C. And the question and the dialogue we're having with all of you now, our customers, is what's your enterprise information strategy? How are you migrating to a single item file or a single source of the truth to reduce unnecessary touch points, data disruptions, but more importantly, delight and satisfy a consumer at the moment of truth with high integrity information? And so our approach thus far at GS1 US has been to go to our traditional identify, capture, share framework. And I'll start with the share and work back to identify. In the share bucket, we've really been focused on three key things. First, our product data management strategy through our OneSync business unit. Product data management looks not just at data synchronization anymore, but how do we aggregate data? Structured and unstructured data, social media data. How do we aggregate that, standardize it, so we can look at data as an asset, information as an asset? And we're investing very heavily to make that capability available to you very, very soon. The second component is global reach, one-to-many on a global basis. And you've probably heard about our recent announcement of a letter of intent to merge our OneSync data pool with SA2 WorldSync, the largest data pool in Europe. And then the third is around availability, making our traditional GS1 reference data available through APIs that any solution provider can access very easily. Our reference data for global location numbers for G10s. Shifting over to capture, we're working with the industry to set in place guidelines as to when and how to use different symbologies, so we avoid having multiple barcodes on the same package, which is confusing for trading partners and takes up valuable real estate on your package. And then on identify, two areas. The first is around global trade item number allocation, balancing the need to change G10s to manage data quality with the cost to the industry of doing that, and working very hard to drive some consensus on that topic. And then secondly, striking partnerships with platform providers like eBay, who you're going to hear from in a moment, and helping them understand the value of leveraging and utilizing GS1 standards so we can have interoperability between physical and digital commerce. Because as Amit says in eBay, there's no physical and digital commerce, it's just commerce. And you'll hear him talk about that a little bit. So we think that's very important to make sure that we don't create another standard when the existing one will do. So what I'd like to do now is share with you some market research we've been doing around consumer behavior and how are the consumers dealing with some of these new trends in B2B2C. And then afterwards, we'll be joined on the stage by our three panelists, and we can get going with the panel discussion. So if we could go to the video, please, that'd be great.
Until recently, communicating with me about your product was pretty straightforward.
You control what you wanted people like me to know.
Your voice came booming across the airways.
Into my living room, through my TV.
And across the pages of my magazine.
Sure, my neighbor might tell me what she thought.
Or the salesperson at the store downtown.
But your voice prevailed.
That's all changed.
Now everyone in the world is my neighbor.
Every salesperson is my salesperson.
A sea of information is at my fingertips.
Good and bad.
I have options. I choose who to listen to, I choose how, and where, and when.
Based on what works for me.
I want reliable.
I want personal.
I want easy.
Okay. See if I can avoid falling off the stage here by taking this chair. So let me introduce our panelists here. To my immediate right is Tim Dorgan, who is from the Peapod organization and is responsible for a lot of the mobile activity recently that Peapod has been doing. Next to Tim is Anita Balaraman at Walmart Labs, who is responsible and leading a lot of the activity at Walmart Labs as far as how can we leverage what we're learning in the digital environment to make the shopping experience at Walmart unique and enjoyable for the consumer. And to my far right is Amit Menopaz, Senior Director for eBay, and Amit has been working with us for a few months now, and very good to see you again. We were together in Brussels. So I'm actually going to start with Tim. And Tim, if you would just kind of level set us a little bit on what's happening at Peapod. You've been at this now for a number of years. Peapod was a real early adopter. 1996, I think, is when the first website went up. And perhaps you can share a little bit about what's happening at Peapod.
I'd be happy to. Actually, the first website did go up in '96, but the company was founded in 1989, which makes it a very, very old internet company. And I think there's an interesting and hopefully a funny story about how the company got its name. It's to the point about trivia. This will be a good answer to a trivia question. But the two brothers that founded the company were Andrew and Thomas Parkinson, and they always wanted to start a business. And back in their teenage years, they came up with an idea for a company that was going to be called Parkinson Product One Design, PPOD, or Peapod. So time passed, and then they realized they wanted to start a business that would fundamentally improve people's lives through technology, and they decided that was going to be the grocery business that would also enable an information services business. So that company was going to be called Information and Products on Demand, IPOD, iPod. And they got together and said, that is one lousy name. No one will ever remember that name. But we've got this PPOD thing. Let's just stretch it out and call it Peapod. So that's what the company was named, founded in 1989. And we've been in the grocery business, the online grocery business, ever since. Today, we are the largest local delivery e-grocer in the US. What distinguishes us is we deliver the full grocery store. We deliver fresh, frozen, dry grocery to households in the Northeast United States, really all along the eastern seaboard, as well as in Chicago, Indianapolis, and southern Wisconsin. We're a wholly owned division of Ahold USA. We go to market as Peapod in Chicago, Peapod by Stop and Shop in the Northeast, and Peapod by Giant in the Mid-Atlantic. To date, we've delivered 20 million orders, 1 billion products. Those are good boxcar numbers. But the most important thing are the logistics, the product quality, and all the e-commerce skills that we've developed along the way. The technology is important, but what's most important is that the ice cream shows up at your door frozen, the bread isn't crushed, the bananas are green if you ordered green bananas, and that takes a lot of logistical skills, as you might imagine, and that's where we're at today. One of the latest developments, and Bob alluded to it, was our commitment to mobile. We launched our iPhone and Android apps late in 2010. Early in 2011, we launched our iPad app, and it's had a quantum impact on our business. At this point, about 20% of Peapod orders are touched by one mobile session. Generally, it takes 2 or 3 sessions for somebody to top their order off, and what's happening is they're starting their order on the PC, and then while they're out at their kid's soccer game, wherever, they think, you know what, I need bananas, I need this, I need that, and they're pulling out that mobile device and adding those items. And that's been a key driver in our business over the last 16 months. Voice recognition is part of it, but I would say that's sort of a minor part. The scanning of items, the adding items to the list has really been the key in increasing our basket size. Now, the latest thing, and if you've been reading the trades at all, hopefully this isn't a secret, but we have launched our first virtual store. We actually launched it in Philadelphia at transit stops in the Philadelphia metro area. And at these stops, and what you're seeing here is the latest version of this, which is in a Chicago subway station underneath the city. And consumers are invited, if they don't have our app, to download it. But then, importantly, with all these items and many, many categories and many, many CPG companies represented, they can then use their phone to scan a barcode and add those items to their order. And that barcode is at the heart of what we're doing here. And as was mentioned earlier, there is no patience if it returns the wrong data. It's got to be the right image, the right price, in our case, the right ingredients, information, the right serving suggestions. All those things have to be spot on. And as I said, digital assets are critical to success, and we have a sister company called Item Master that has really taken upon themselves as their mission to create an open source repository for CPG graphics and data. And that data is becoming bigger and bigger as consumer expectations rise. It's not only ingredient information, nutritional information, which is very important, but it's going to be video, it's going to be ratings and reviews, all that linked to the barcode, and everything that Item Master is doing is consistent with GS1 standards, and this partnership between us and Item Master is becoming more and more important as consumers are carrying more of these handheld devices around and hopefully adding to their Peapod order. And that's my story.
That's your story. So we'll turn it quickly over to Anita, and perhaps you can talk about at Walmart Labs, which a lot of people may not be so familiar with, and how you're translating a lot of the learnings from what's happening online back into the store environment. So that'd be great.
Thanks, Bob. So quick introduction. Hope you can hear me. So my name is Anita Balaraman, and I'm a principal product manager at Walmart Labs. Some of the products I manage at Labs are coming up with global services that work on a global platform that enables multi-channel e-commerce, which is where Walmart is going. So maybe I can tell you a little bit about what Walmart Labs is and how it got started. It was formed by the Cosmix acquisition in May of 2011. It was led by Venki and Anand, and they were the e-commerce pioneers and former Amazon executives. Walmart Labs is about 200 people, big team, and growing every day. We have offices in San Bruno and also in Bangalore and India. The vision, the core vision of Walmart Labs is to make the buying and the merchandising better and smarter by using signals of consumer intent. And what I mean by signals is the different sources from which you get information on what the consumer intends to buy, because marketing at its core is matching your customer with what they want, their product. So as Bob had alluded to before and the video showed you before, the e-commerce landscape is rapidly changing, right? So we have some of the big initiators of this big change is social media and the social networks, and just an explosion of all types of mobile devices. So that has fundamentally changed the way people shop and also fundamentally changed the way retailers respond. So today's marketplace in some ways is changing, so it kind of defies what you call as the customer intent. Earlier you had a very linear progression of consumer behavior, the whole buying funnel and whatnot, and that's morphed in some ways into a continuous process of exploration. So the customer is constantly exploring and using the web to get information about the product. Well, the information that the customer is getting comes from a variety of sources, just because of the explosion in mobile devices and also social networks. When you get information from multiple sources, they're not always going to say the same thing. And it's critical that there be a consistent message of the product to the consumer to provide that seamless experience to them. So getting the right information to the customer in a consistent way, something that's consistent with the brand image, and also making sure that they deliver a positive customer experience is critical. So a lot of what Walmart Labs has been doing is making sure that there is that consistency in the information that's provided by being able to harness the information that comes from multiple mobile devices. And that's exactly how GS1 standards fit in, right? So when you have information coming from these different sources, they all need to tie in back in some way using their GTIN numbers and whatnot. This makes the process a lot more efficient in the sense e-commerce has gone from 1.0, where you had taking the store to the web, and it's morphed into 2.0, where we're taking the web to the store, creating that seamless experience. So if that's the case, we have the same vendors and sometimes same business partners serving two different areas, or two different partners serving the online versus the store, the brick and mortar ones. So having the process become a lot more efficient from our suppliers and partners all the way to the end customer is where GS1 standards fits in. And then ensuring that you have the appropriate product, the right product. So say you're a customer that gets in to the store and creating that seamless online and offline experience, it requires that you have the right information and the right product, whether it is on your virtual shelf or whether it is on the store shelf. And helping that collaboration between your trading partners, that's where GS1 actually fits in. Now this is an image of what Walmart's vision is, and a lot of the services that I referred to that I'm working on help support this vision. So this is a vision of what we call as the endless aisle. So you don't have an aisle on the virtual store that ends right there, and then this is where it begins. It's almost like whether you're shopping online or whether you're in the retail store, you can get the same product and the same information, and it kind of blends and merges in a hopefully cohesive way. And that has led us to develop a bunch of products which are actually aimed at things like self-service. For instance, we've found out from statistics that about over 40% of the Walmart shoppers have smartphones. So using the smartphones in some ways to enable self-service, optimize their store visits, come up with their lists and optimize it. The second one was create a very personal shopping experience. How we do that is by tapping into some of their social networks to offer product recommendations, which are very specific and personal. And the third is delivering a unique multi-channel experience. And what that means for Walmart is everyday low prices, and how the customer can be guaranteed of everyday low prices regardless of which channel they shop through. So those are and that's our vision for most of the products that we're working on right now. That's to you.
So now we'll turn it over to Amit. Perhaps you can refresh the audience a little bit with what's happening in eBay.
Sure. I'll try to, I'll be building on all of these great suggestions already. I'll try and give you some sense of the business opportunity that eBay sees in all of this and some of the technologies we're investing in, and why eBay is such a big supporter of GS1, the industry standard, and I personally spend so much time on this. My job is as close to a supply chain management president for eBay that would exist, given that all of the sellers and the diversity of categories don't really work as part of eBay, but work with eBay as a partner. Join in the game of trivia, I'll just ask one question about the history of eBay. Anybody know what the first product that was sold on eBay was? A broken laser pointer. This was the first time there was a sale online between an anonymous buyer and seller. They did not know one another, and they successfully exchanged product and money. And there were a few dozen items on the site. Today, as you can see in the slide, there are over 100 million buyers and sellers interacting across the globe in over 40 countries, $2,000 per second being transacted, and over 300 million items on the site. Actually, last Friday, it was 340 million. Across 50,000 different categories of anything you can imagine and a few things that you can't. All this is running on a data warehouse that's roughly 100 times the size of the Library of Congress. So that is a snapshot of what eBay is today across the world. Now, if we look forward as to where is commerce going, here are the things that we look at. So as what has traditionally been considered an e-commerce company, through to 2015, we're expecting e-commerce to grow to a $300 billion industry, which is great news, very rapid growth. But still, if you think about it, it's a fraction of the total commerce industry, which is, in the US, expected to grow to $4 trillion. The more interesting trend that we're focused on is what is referred to as cross-channel commerce. And you've heard some examples of that already today. You imagine that being the person who's doing their online research, selects their item, goes to the store in order to buy it, or conversely, people who treat the store to some extent as a showroom, and after they've finalized the selection of their product, sometimes from within the store using their mobile phone, finding a better price somewhere else. This is the trend that we think defines the future. What's driving this trend? In a word, consumers. Consumers have become spoiled. And they expect all of the benefits that they've experienced offline or online to go with them wherever they are, and to work no matter what mode of operation they choose to select. They may have their mobile phone with them, they may be sitting at a computer, they may be physically in the store, and they may have a combination of those devices with them depending on the situation. And in all cases, they still expect to be able to scan, pay, receive coupons, carry their wish lists, all of these things to carry with them and for us to be aware of them personally and their interests and their needs. Now, this drives a lot of technology complexity, especially for retailers, both large and small. And here, the three trends which you've already heard touched upon that eBay is investing a lot on is mobile, social, and local. Mobile, which started 3 years ago as a business that ran $2 billion through mobile, we're now expecting this year to have over $8 billion worth of merchandise purchased through mobile phones. So this is not an emerging trend, it is an existing fact. Okay? In social, we're releasing applications such as group gifting, which is a mashup between eBay, PayPal, and Facebook to allow people, friends and family, to get together to buy something together for somebody that they care about, all seamlessly through these multi-format devices. With local, the goal is to take all of the offline inventory and make it visible online. If you think about it, for small local shops who have whatever fan base they have in their local community, they're effectively invisible online. Even if they were to set up a website, the ability for them to drive traffic to their website in competition with everything else going on is very limited. By incorporating them into our channels, both on the site and off the site, across all of the different channels that we use, we make them suddenly available both nationally and internationally to audiences they haven't even thought about yet. And for large retailers, there's a benefit that at the beginning was considered a threat, Up until now, retailers have been looking at the online commerce piece and saying, I don't want to compete online because price comparison is easy. There's a disadvantage that we have since we have this national footprint and all of this capital investment. How are we possibly going to compete on price? I don't even want to compete on price. We're actually offering them an ability to steal back some of that share. Why? Because when people see that they have alternatives that are local to them, that national footprint becomes an advantage. Because people make a choice sometimes to pay a little bit more for instant gratification because they forgot the birthday present and they need it now. Because there are certain personalized services that can be available in the store, in the neighborhood for the people who are there. And because there are a lot of services that stores can offer that online you can't, such as installation or customization of the products. So, all of that blends into an offer of eBay as a partner to sellers of all sizes and shapes to try and cope with this technology whirlwind. As consumers try to interact with all of the product data in the way that's most meaningful to them, eBay is trying to make the investments necessary for the retailers and the brands and the manufacturers to focus on designing, making, and customizing the products and services, and then making sure that they are available consistently across every channel. And we can share that inventory locally, nationally, internationally, across all of the different modes and formats. And where there are sellers who are tech-savvy, or even developers who are competing to create, for certain niches, special, unique shopping experiences we haven't even invented yet, they now have access through xCommerce to all of the assets that eBay has invested in order to give them an opportunity to leverage that. First and foremost, related to the topic of today, is the product catalog, in which we have over 40 million products today, but only about half of them with the GTIN information. So why would you provide GTIN information to eBay? The short answer is because it tells us what you're promoting. But let me turn that into some practical implications to your distribution channels. When we know exactly what you're selling, and we know that the information is correct, we are able to do many things in order to promote the business that sells these products. We're able to drive more traffic to those products. We're able to share that inventory contextually targeted to people both on the site and off the site. We're able to share it through mobile and social, and if we don't have that information, we don't share. So all of that business is an opportunity cost that's being lost by people who don't provide us that information. And having a trusted source of data is something that eBay, and as a platform, and I think you've heard it from my other peers here as well, is necessary for this entire thing to get to an entire new scale of operation. And as eBay, as a partner to sellers, we're also willing to share and contribute, which is why we're so excited to be working with the industry standard. So my call to action would be for all of the people in this audience, and I understand these are primarily supply chain people in various different categories, all of which we embrace, to go back home and when you get to your offices, find the peers in your marketing departments and walk over to them and tell them these stories and explain to them that they are missing out on sales. They are missing out on sales. When we don't get the information, we'll guess. And based on our automatic systems, we usually term it in terms of 95% precision and 80% recall on average, which means when we make a guess, we may be 5% wrong. That is very bad for everybody, buyers and sellers and the platform. And 20% of the things we don't find. 20% of the time, it's just sitting there, a missed opportunity to sell your product. So go back and share that with the marketing departments and tell them that as you're using the GTINs in order to carry things through the supply chain, you wouldn't send a product without its packaging and its instructions out to the retail shop. A consumer gets a hold of it and hope that they'll get that information some other way. This information is necessary to be coming through the supply chain all the way through altogether and requires us all to work more closely and in a more coordinated fashion. And I'd say that that would be the most important thing that could happen coming out of today.
Thank you, Amit. That's great. And thank you, Anita and Tim as well. And I should note that all three of these companies have been a part of the GS1 B2C Alliance that we started about 1.5 years ago to foster and begin this dialogue with different stakeholders along all of the supply chain. You all talked about the use of mobile that's happening, and you talked about the importance of information integrity. Tim, I just wanted to ask you, from your perspective, what do you think brand owners could do to help solve this problem more urgently, given the importance to the online business?
Well, I think as a start, they need to recognize, I think, the upside of this. I don't know, I can't speak for your businesses, but the mobile volume that we're getting is incremental. Incremental volume in the grocery business is tough to come by. And if the manufacturers with whom we're working are not working with Item Master and making sure that there is a trusted source of data linked to the UPC code that will deliver that information really at the point of decision. And that point of decision is in a subway station. It's in a lot of different places it never was before. If you're not participating in that, then you're missing out on incremental volume, and that's tough to come by.
Amit, just a question for you around the change in consumer behavior with mobile and how you're seeing that affect your business. Perhaps you can talk a little bit more about how that's putting, per your Commerce 3.0 slide, how that's putting a lot of pressure on your business model, and again, how brand owners can help you with that.
Yeah, so the form factor of mobile, okay, is limited. In other words, one of the key challenges there is how do you get the minimum amount of information for people to know that they're making the right decision. And there, really, what you want to get to is a point where they actually don't have to look at most of the information because they trust it. Because when you get there, then you have things like one-click purchases. When you get there, then you can link all of the other benefits in a very confident way. When you get there, you can make recommendations and defaults for people that save them time and make all of that frictionless. And so as that business grows, and it's been growing exponentially over the past few years, and we integrate it more seamlessly with every other mode and channel, the criticality of having that trusted, unique identifier with the related product information, should somebody choose to verify what they're looking at, okay, becomes the difference between success and failure of the experience.
Anita, maybe you can talk a little bit about, given the rapid adoption of that technology by consumers, mobile, even among older shoppers, how that may be changing the shopping patterns, how that's changing the shopping behavior, both online and offline at
Sure.
Walmart.
So most of our shoppers, like I mentioned, over 40% of them seem to have smartphones, and more than half of them seem to do their online research or get multiple sources of information before they actually come to the store. Or we have programs where you can pick up from the store or ship it to the store or buy it and have it delivered, various forms thereof. So when you're transcending from one channel to the other, even for some of the traditional Walmart shoppers who've become familiar going to the brick and mortar stores and getting the brand product that they actually trust, getting other sources of information, whether from their social networks or whatnot, keeping the identity of the brand becomes even more critical. Are we still talking about the same product over here with all these features as it pertains to, this specific Apple, iPhone, whatever, or are we talking about a different Samsung variety, whatever it be? But that part of it becomes a lot more critical for them, especially when you're transcending across and having even the traditional shoppers actually get a lot of their product information through various sources prior to actually making the purchase. Enabled, of course, clearly through your mobile phones or your iPads or whatnot.
Amit, just a question for you, and I love your call to action, and it's one that certainly touches our hearts at GS1 because we're trying to help tell the story about crossing the aisle to the demand side and asking many people who have really experienced the power of GS1 standards in the B2B space to try to translate that story with our help over to the demand side. What do you think some of the barriers are? When you see the opportunity, the revenue opportunity, Tim, to your point, and we see how important the information is to that consumer behavior, what do you think is getting in the way of getting that data to be available?
So three barriers that I encounter often include the following. First of all, what seems to be a fairly trivial one but often gets in our way is simply organizational structure. So oftentimes the people who appreciate the power of this are sitting on the supply chain side. The people who are working on the product marketing material have their own systems, files, standards, and ways of working. And they don't really intersect. And when I speak when I try to, the way that we try to get around that is simply offer them to share with us the information any way they like. They don't have to think about if they have it in a digitized form, and sometimes not even digitized, in any form whatsoever, we're happy to help start working with them on that, just as an effort to start to generate that kind of recognition and activity. I think that's one trivial but important piece. Second piece has to do with some sense of loss of control of the information. And there's a protection for the distribution channel where they say, here are our authorized dealers and resellers, and they are the ones who get the information, and we don't want the information to get out of our hands into multiple other places. And to that, I simply explain that there really is no control over that. If it's gone onto the internet, you now have no control anymore of what's going on. I promise you that, for example, I'll speak just for eBay, all that information is being fed back into the system from our various sellers, many of them who are not necessarily in your official distribution channel, and that information is being represented in many different ways. How much better would it be if you would engage that actively by providing that information and not worrying too much about how it's going to be changed? You'd be surprised at what kind of business opportunities arise from sharing more information into places and channels you may not have explored before. One corollary to that I use often is in Apple with iTunes. They didn't try to stop the existence of every other form of, in the music industry of that song. They simply provided a simple, consistent, and easily accessible by consumers format to go, and most people went and interacted with that. But it didn't require controlling and enforcing the entire industry in order to get that started. And then the final part, I think, is the lack of clear understanding of the business case. The business case is enormous. I think that really the experience that people have within their offline experience keeps them very much in the areas where they feel comfortable. There are pockets in every company that treat the online marketing piece as a side piece. It's currently whatever, 2, 3, 5% of their business, and don't recognize that there is no difference between online and offline. And therefore, if they're doing something right offline, they should be doing that as right online. And if they really recognize that connection, they would be running to these groups in order to, whether it's the supply chain or the online marketing people, in order to help them get that information out the door.
So I just want to add to that, the last part, specifically the lack of awareness. So we see that a lot, especially if you have a partner who serves your brick and mortar stores. And there's not a lot of rich information that is typically provided for a product that's sold through your stores. And so not being aware of the need to actually provide that information that translate and transcend, so you don't have this aisle that ends at the store and then not, another aisle that begins on your website. So being able to see that translate all the way through and providing that information is one of them. The second is to do with marketplace partners. That could be any mom, pop who wants to sell something as a vendor through our online site. Oftentimes they don't, I think, realize the importance of having even a UPC or a GTIN, for example, which then is their little key to unlock a whole bunch of information that's going to help create the demand for their products. So I think the last part is pretty critical.
If I could just add one thing, too, in terms of inhibitors to companies supporting this, I think there's a general underappreciation for the appetite that consumers have for more and more relevant information. We have some CPG partners who provide a lot and some that don't. And even for the most mundane product, I remember back in 1996, for the first time Peapod had a graphic image of every single item in its database, about 10,000 grocery products at the time, and which product you think was clicked on the most to get a product image and nutritional information. It was Campbell's chicken noodle soup. You'd think people would know what that looked like. But even then, there's a curiosity, and today, of course, it goes much deeper than that. So I don't think we should underestimate the appetite that consumers have for more and more information about the products that they consume.
I can also add one other aspect people don't think about. We talk a lot about mobile, but really it's about the seamless integration. You mentioned multi-channel and omni-channel between the offline and online. So if you imagine, I mean, right now I can't think of a bus stop or a billboard that doesn't have a QR code or some other reference, okay? What that's doing, okay, is creating sharing of information across platforms. And without the use of the GTIN, that really gets blocked. You don't get that opportunity to share all that rich information. And each format has its own special use. And so what you can't do on a billboard, you can do, you know, on the computer and on your mobile. And that kind of sharing can't happen unless you embrace this connection.
So Amit, Anita, Tim, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. This has been really insightful. Hopefully the audience enjoyed it. And I think your comments are really relevant to the future that lies ahead of us. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank
you.